Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Requiem for Heroes by Michael Anderle, narrated by Megan Tusing. Chapter 1. Viking Inc. Lakeland Facility, Training Grounds, East Shenandoah, Virginia, Thursday, noon. After spending the last 7 days straight running the same grueling obstacle course and cramming for emergency field medic tests, Valerie was on the hunt for some good old-fashioned fun. If she'd thought she was going to find it in her weekly motorbike training session, she was intensely disappointed. "You gotta quit flirting with the holes and get in there," Val's passenger shouted into her ear as they rounded the curve and slowed to weave the bike through a hellscape of mud-filled potholes. "The target is getting away!" Berry brambles had overgrown the course, and their thorny canes grabbed and ripped at Val's jacket and the strands of hair that escaped her helmet. The course, a repurposed ATV and dirt bike trail, wove through miles of densely wooded Shenandoah forest. Through the underbrush ahead, Val made out the dark human shape running down the narrow path, shrinking into the shadows. The target was getting away, weaving easily between the potholes that slowed Val to a crawl. He was on foot, and she was on a damned dirt bike, and he was getting away. Jenkins' legs clamped like a vice around Val's hips, and she rapped her knuckles against Val's helmet. "It's a dirt bike, honey. It can handle a few potholes. If you're that afraid of smashing your twat, then wear a cup next time." Somewhere in the back of Val's head, Regenleaf stirred. "Would this steed move significantly faster if we were to cast the harpy overboard?" The target rounded a corner in the trail and vanished from sight. They were less than 200 yards from the end of the course, and if Gunnar beat them back to base again, Val would never hear the end of it. Val set her jaw, angled the front wheel of the bike towards the least pockmarked section of the trail, and squeezed the throttle. "Both of you shut the hell up!" The engine roared. The bike sprang forward in a cloud of trail dust and smoke, skipping across the rough terrain with enough force to make Val's vision rattle. The bike's wide wheels slushed through the muddy puddles, but at the end of the most treacherous stretch of the trail, they caught on an outstretched tree root and popped off the ground. "Control it!" Jenkins bellowed as Val wrestled to hang on to the bike. "Control it!" The front wheel hit the ground and spun out, sending the entire machine skittering off the side of the trail. Val flew off her seat and soared into the underbrush, remembering to pull in her limbs and tuck her head half a second before she would have cracked several ribs against a hickory tree. She rolled to a stop, wheezing for breath. The forest fell silent. "Thy steed is swift," Regenleaf observed. "But dost thou know what won't fling itself suicidally off a cliff?" Val groaned and rolled onto her back. "We're not getting horses." She reached up to tug her helmet off her head and stared up into the face of an angel. Sergeant Michael Gunnar Kowalski stood over her with his own helmet tucked under his arm, and his flowing hair spilling down the back of his motorcycle jacket. He reached down to offer her a hand. Val reached up and slapped his knee. "Ha! I didn't hear no bell, Sarge. Race isn't over. Gotcha." The sergeant rolled his eyes and hauled her to her feet. Technically, she was correct. Her only objective for this training exercise had been to tag him before he reached the end of the course. "You want me to put Kiri wins on a technicality on the leaderboards? That will go over real well for you, rookie. We'll just strike this one from the records." He brushed a clump of wet leaves from her shoulder. In the woods behind them, Jenkins was riding the fallen dirt bike and rolling it back toward the path. "Looks like a dent in the rim," Jenkins observed. She hopped the bike over the tree root that had been their undoing and shot Val a shit-eating grin. "Jesus, Kiri, you gotta go easier on the equipment. This stuff costs money." Val flicked Jenkins a rueful smile and a middle finger to match. "I hope your balls bruise." Jenkins shook her head with a tisk. "That's enough live training for today. Gunnar decided, as the three of them trudged to the end of the trail, where the woods opened up into the open compound of the Lakeland training facility.
Keep practicing, Kiri. Your control's getting better, but you're still riding like you expect the machine to read your mind.
A horse is more reliable, Regenleaf agreed. We're not getting horses, Val repeated under her breath.
We'll run the course again Saturday morning,
Gunnar added, oblivious to Val's comment.
0500.
Val didn't complain. She was an early riser by nature. A 5 a.m. drill on a weekend would have struck most people as a punishment. But she'd been up every morning this week at 3:30 for morning runs. Viking was an unconventional paramilitary outfit, but they still took their rookie training regimen seriously. Gunnar's phone rang a jaunty sea shanty as they wheeled the bike toward the mechanic's bay at the edge of the Lakeland compound. He fished it from his pocket and pressed it to his ear, shaking the length of his silky locks out of the collar of his jacket. It's not fair, is it? Jenkins wheeled the wobbling bike over the asphalt beside Val. Jenkins' lips were pressed into a thin line, halfway between envy and adoration of the golden hair spilling down to the sergeant's waist. Val thought his hair was nice. She would have to ask him what conditioner he used. But she couldn't help but pay more attention to the man's form-fitting jacket and tight pants. Jenkins met Val's eyes and gave her a tight smile. I could take a triple dose of estrogen every day for a year, and that man could still whoop my ass in the Miss Virginia pageant. Is he seeing anyone? It was an idle question, but one that had been bugging Val all week. Not that she was particularly interested in Gunnar. Even Regenleaf, the lizard-brained, id-driven demigod living in Val's head, didn't seem to recognize the man as entirely human. At least not a human eligible for romantic attention. He was too damned pretty. Himself. Jenkins fanned her face. It was sweltering hot, but there was more than a hint of self-aware irony to the gesture. In the mirror. Only thing he's got eyes for, really. Harvey says we did ourselves dirty, calling him Gunnar. That there's a true narcissist, if there's ever been one. Val laughed. Narcissus wasn't exactly known for running obstacle courses in full suits of combat gear. I guess we can at least be thankful for that, Jenkins conceded. They stepped into the shadows of the bay, and Jenkins propped the bike at the end of the row of odd jobs for the mechanic. She slapped Val lightly on the arm. I just got a delivery of fresh practice ammo. 15 minutes to hit the shower, then meet me at the firing range. The MRAD? Val had been itching for a chance to try out the new sniper rifle design ever since she'd laid eyes on it. Jenkins gave her a crooked smile. You'll just have to...
Evening drills just got canceled, Heroman.
Gunnar jogged up behind the women on their way to the main building. He breezed past them at a jog, hair whipping in the wind, and gestured over his shoulder.
A new job just came down the pipe. Gather your squad and meet in tactical. Briefing is in 10 minutes.
Viking Inc. Lakeland Facility, Tactical Room, East Shenandoah, Virginia, Thursday afternoon. When Val walked into the conference room 10 minutes later, she was surprised to find Charlie Evans and Nathaniel Hawker, two of Viking's chief officers, sitting at the table. This was the first time she'd seen either of the Jarls since she'd come to Lakeland a little over 2 weeks ago. Typically, they stuck to the Manassas office, where Viking kept the customer-facing sector of its business. Val was the first member of her training team to make it into the conference room. She slid into a chair, folding a damp towel across her shoulders. Val! Charlie twirled a feather-tipped crazy pen through her fingers. How's boot camp treating you? It's certainly keeping the body busy, Val allowed, wiping sweat from her forehead. The AC was cranked to the max, and the abrupt shift from the sweltering Virginia heat to icy cold left her a touch dizzy. She nodded at Hawk, who was buried in his laptop. Any updates on Cleopatra? What? Hawk looked up, startled. He seemed to register the question, consider it, and dismiss it summarily.
No. My sources haven't noted any change in Claudia Moreno's activities since the Morocco debacle. You should stay focused on what's ahead of you, Kiri, not what's behind.
Charlie laughed, rapping Hawk affectionately on the head with the feathered tip of her pen. Give the lady a break. Boot camp can be a drag. We all need goals to help us get through. Val's is to kick Cleopatra's ass.
Hawk reached up and snatched the pen from Charlie's hands. Then she's probably going to be disappointed. Not every job has closure.
He tossed the pen down the table, out of Charlie's reach.
Taggart gave her a box of those stupid things this morning, he complained. She was playing with them the whole drive out here.
It was a work anniversary present. Charlie rose from her chair and reached across the table for her pen. 5 years at Viking. The real gift was how much it annoys you. You drove here together? Val asked. Hawk grunted. It was a defeated, regretful sound. We try to make it out to Lakeland every couple of weeks, Charlie explained. Second Thursday of the month. It's barbecue night. You're staying for the brisket, right? Charlie's easygoing demeanor did not presage a particularly dire assignment. Val shook her head. It's my brother's birthday. I promised I'd be at family dinner tonight, unless lives were on the line. Hawk caught Val's gaze.
How's the stealth tech project going?
Val blinked. The what? At that moment, the door swung open with a whoosh of warm air. Jacob Pinkerton strode into the room, followed by Jenkins and Harvey, who was still limping with a crutch after he'd torn a tendon on the Machthaus job.
Good. Everyone's here.
Hawk snatched the mission files from Charlie and handed one to each team member as they took their seats.
Let's get started.
Val took her file, shrugging off the stealth tech comment. It wouldn't be the first time Hawk had dropped an inscrutable non sequitur. Jacob had taken the chair closest to Val, and judging by the immaculate condition of his button-down shirt, he had spent the morning sequestered in a dark and cool office, not wading through the mud. It made Val even more self-conscious of her pit stains. This morning, we got a call from an Oklahoma City firm called Arrowroot Manufacturing, Charlie began. They build custom small-batch parts for the airline industry. 2 months ago, they won a government contract to supply the DoD with some experimental landing strip matting. Yesterday afternoon, the funding account for the matting project was hacked.
The funding for just the matting project?
Jacob flipped through the Arrowroot dossier at the top of his mission file. Charlie nodded. According to the contract, they have to keep the matting project funds separate from their other operation accounts. They're keeping a sharp eye on the rest of their accounts since the breach, obviously, but nothing else has been disturbed.
That's pretty standard for DoD contracts that go out to the public sector, Harvey pointed out.
He was a lean man, nondescript, save for his shaggy, chin-length hair. The tips of his elaborate full-sleeve tattoos peeked out of the cuffs of his shirt when he leaned forward to read the dossier.
Funds need to be kept separate from the general operation budget in case of an audit.
Or theft, Jenkins added. She took a long swig from her Powerade. Thankfully, Arrowroot's got a decent lady heading up their network security, Charlie went on. She caught the leak and transferred the grant funds before the account could be emptied. The company lost about $1,500 to the hack, but all things considered, the damage was minimal.
So far, Hawk clarified. The leak and rescue happened last night. This morning, Arrowroot received a message that appears to be from the hacker. They're demanding Arrowroot cancel the DoD project before 1700 hours Friday.
Or else? Jacob asked.
Hawk shrugged. Or else. There's no specific threat against the accounts or Arrowroot's system as a whole.
He tapped his computer screen, and the display monitor mounted to the wall behind him flickered to life, displaying a few lines of old-fashioned white text across a black background. Cancel the military contract, or it will be canceled for you. You have until 1700 Friday. No cops, no feds, no outsiders.
That's an odd pivot, Harvey muttered as he studied the screen. Cyber thieves just look for gaps in account security and siphon off funds. That's what the initial hack into Arrowroot's accounts look like. Someone spotted an opportunity and jumped on it. Now that the security gap is plugged, thieves wouldn't have anything to gain by targeting Arrowroot's projects any further, and everything to lose, since it risks revealing their identity. Are we sure the initial hacker is the same person who sent this vague threat, Jarl?
Both the account hack and the unsigned message originated from the same remote ISP, which has since gone dark. So for now, yes, we're assuming they came from the same party. Which means that theft of the funds wasn't the primary goal, Val suggested. The account hack was just to get Arrowroot's attention. What the suspect really wants is to gum up the DoD project. Maybe it's an ideological thing? Anti-government. Anti-military, at least.
Jenkins frowned and shuffled through the files.
No, the suspect probably isn't trying to sabotage the landing strip project itself. Aha!
She found the list she was seeking and held it up for the team to see.
You're 3 steps ahead of me as always, Charlie. Here's a list of other firms that placed bids on the DoD contract. This is hardly top-secret stuff Arrowroot is working on. Right here, we have a list of almost 20 other firms that thought they could do the job just as well or even better. No matter what happens, someone is going to make those shiny new landing strips.
So maybe someone just doesn't want Arrowroot to succeed at the project.
Jacob took the list of rival firms from Jenkins and scanned the names.
Podjet, AIRC, Glidden Industries. The DoD is a creature of habit. Folks over there like to stick with what they know works. The matting project is just one job. But if Arrowroot nails it, they're on the short list for future contracts. On the other hand, there's a whole boatload of small firms and startups that get another chance to impress the feds if Arrowroot flubs the job.
Mr. Rainford, our point man at Arrowroot, is thinking along the same lines, Charlie agreed. They think one of the rival firms is trying to sabotage their project.
Hawk made a note on his tablet. I've already got a forensics team on the job. They're going down that list of rival firms and investigating them for motive and opportunity, tugging on threads, see if anything comes loose.
This hack spooked the bigwigs at Arrowroot, Charlie added. They're not used to drawing this kind of attention, and they want to make sure something like this never happens again. We've already begun a remote analysis of their outdated security protocols. They want the full Viking treatment.
It looks like Viking is already on top of the job.
Jacob settled back in his chair, folding his arms behind his head, and giving Val a face full of his Old Spice deodorant.
As much as we can be from across the country, at least. But I'm guessing they still want boots on the ground inspecting the facilities in person.
That would make Mr. Rainford feel better, Charlie acknowledged. Having an experienced team around when the deadline passes. We don't know what kind of retribution this hacker is planning, but we want the 4 of you out there making sure that whatever it is, it's minimal. Val crossed her fingers beneath the table. Got it. When do we leave? The Gulf is undergoing maintenance at the moment, but she'll be ready to go by the wee hours. Charlie peered around the table. Any of you object to an early morning? Say, wheels up at 6? That will put you in OKC around 8, and you'll have the full workday to investigate the facility and prepare before deadline hits. Val let out a little breath and nodded. She'd have to cut her evening short, but at least she wasn't going to miss her second family cookout in a row. Grams would never let her hear the end of it.
Jenkins sighed.
Okay, see you in the summer. Pack the sandals and sunscreen, mis amigos. That still air is punishing.
The team got to their feet, and Hawk stopped them. One more thing. Arrowroot had passable security on its financial accounts, but the encryption on their camera network is basically non-existent. I'm doing what I can to get it upgraded as quickly as possible, but there's a very real possibility that our hacker has already accessed the feeds. You mean our suspect already has eyes inside the manufacturing plant? Harvey frowned. Hawk nodded. Between that and the possibility that the hacker is working with a factory employee, we need to assume so, yes.
And Arrowroot isn't supposed to involve outsiders. Val pointed to the last few lines of the blackmail note on the screen. So we need to avoid tipping them off.
Charlie smiled. Arrowroot ships a lot of goods through private couriers.
Conveniently, there's going to be a company box truck waiting at the airstrip tomorrow morning, right around the time you'll be landing. One of the things this truck will be picking up is a fresh case of company uniforms for their warehouse employees. Are you guys ready for an undercover assignment? Chapter 2. Pearson Residence, Manassas, Virginia, Thursday evening. When Val informed her team she'd be going back to Manassas for the evening instead of joining the company's monthly barbecue, Jenkins, Jacob, Charlie, and the rest had warned her she was missing something special. Sergeant Gunnar's famous marinated pork, Charlie's favorite pineapple upside-down cake, Quartermaster Tasha's homemade baked beans. All the summer classics. Val was not immune to the siren song of good food, and there was something to be said for camaraderie. But after 2 weeks stuck at Lakeland and getting the full dose of camaraderie 24/7, Val would not have traded away her family's backyard cookout for any corporate barbecue, no matter how many hogs were roasting over the fire. It was not that Hank Keary was a good cook. He squeezed the juices from the burgers, and his idea of a good steak was a well-done steak. But he was family, and it was tradition. The right mead or beer could make any offering a feast anyway. Hank also had his twin 7-year-old daughters for the weekend, and it had been too long since Val had seen her nieces. Allie and Emmy were in the pool, shrieking laughter and beating Uncle Puck over the head with foam noodles when Val slipped in through the side gate to Dad's backyard. The air smelled like charcoal and sizzling meat, coconut sunscreen and summer heat. The signatures of revelry and joy stirred something inside Val.
"Are we feasting again?"
Regenleaf asked sleepily. The other woman had spent much of the last several days snoozing in the back of Val's mind, waking only intermittently to offer some anachronistic advice about hand-to-hand combat, or warn Val when Gunnar was gaining on her in the obstacle course.
"What is the occasion? Is it a holy day?"
"It's a little holiday," Val explained.
She crossed the fresh-cut lawn where Dad and Hank were frowning over the grill. David Pearson saw his daughter and waved her forward, his face splitting into an uncharacteristically wide grin. "It's a family tradition," Val told Regenleaf as she set her store-bought tray of cheese and crackers on the picnic table.
"That makes it a holy day, kind of."
"Val!" Dad, normally quite straight-laced and reserved, flung his arms wide to pull his youngest and eldest children into an impromptu, sweaty hug. "Everyone's here. We got the whole band together after all." Val spotted the recycling bin beside the grill, already half full of empty High Life bottles, and sighed. Tradition may have demanded Hank's well-done T-bones, but did it have to demand cheap booze, too? "Dad was convinced you weren't going to make it." Hank's ears pinked, and he shook his head while he rotated the veggie kebabs on the grill. Hank also wasn't used to Dad's increasingly common displays of affection. They were a close-knit family, but Dad had always been a bit aloof when it came to displays of affection. At least since Mom left. "I know what it's like to be young and career-focused." Dad shook his head indulgently.
He drained his beer and dropped the bottle into the recycling.
You forget everything but the mission.
I'm not going to forget dinner. Besides, the mission doesn't start until tomorrow morning.
Val gave her dad a wink, then reached into her messenger bag and pulled out a bottle of mead. She had hoped she wouldn't need to break into her stash, but clearly her male family members hadn't discovered culture in the last month. She was going to set it in the cooler beside the beer, but a wrinkly old hand snaked out from one of the lounge chairs and snatched the bottle from her hands. Grams was lounging in the deep shade of a poolside umbrella, her face hidden beneath a creamy mask of sunscreen. She sat up, lifting her sunglasses to study the label.
Seville, she read approvingly. That's good stuff.
She passed the bottle back to Val.
Pour me a measure, would you? Between your brother's watery beer and Carol's box wine, it's almost like everyone in this family is afraid of a stiff drink.
Hank produced a corkscrew from one of his apron pockets and passed it to Val, rolling his eyes at the old woman's jab.
Happy 35th, old man.
Val floated onto her tiptoes to plant a kiss on her eldest brother's cheek before she opened the bottle. Hank made a grunt that could have been acceptance or dismay and turned back to the grill. Val grabbed a solo cup from the side of the table and poured a generous measure of mead. She took a long sip before passing the cup to her impatient grandmother.
Don't hit that stuff too hard,
Val admonished, reaching to her knees to pull her sundress off and fling it onto an empty chair. Beneath, she wore a sleek black two-piece bathing suit.
I'm counting on you to be a decent euchre partner later. We owe Puck back for that Memorial Day debacle.
In the pool, Allie and Emmy had finally learned the value of teamwork and were hanging off Puck's shoulders, ferociously trying to drag him beneath the surface. Puck let out a dramatic howl and grabbed each of the girls by their little life jackets. He lifted one in each hand, spreading his beefy arms wide to reveal the words, "Sinner in the hands of an angry god," tattooed like broken wings across his shoulder blades. The girls screamed their delight and terror, their spindly legs pedaling uselessly against the water. Val cupped her hands over her mouth.
Hang in there, Alpha Team! Cavalry's on the way!
She threw her arms wide and flung herself into the pool. Late twilight found the Curie kids sitting around the picnic table, their paper dinner plates replaced with bowls of vanilla ice cream topped with fresh strawberries. Allie and Emmy had gone inside to dry off, and no doubt fall asleep watching the newest Pixar movie. Dad, Hank, Val, and Grams were 6 rounds into a cutthroat Texas Hold'em tournament. Puck had already tapped out and was watching the game from the nearest lounge chair, arm in arm with Carol, his girlfriend.
So, Valerie,
Carol cooed once the deck had changed hands, and it was no longer Val's turn to deal.
I haven't seen you since Christmas. Puck says you've got a new job. Some kind of business consulting?
Hank turned over the first 3 cards. Ace of spades, 4 of diamonds, 6 of hearts. Something like that. Val pulled her cards close to her chest and glanced at the corners. Hank had dealt her crap again. 5 of hearts, 9 of spades. She tossed a quarter into the pile to match Graham's bid. You said something about going out on a job tomorrow, Dad prodded, adding his own coin to the pile.
Oh, what's the assignment?
Carol sipped her glass of boxed wine. That was a new development. When Puck had brought Carol home for Christmas, the woman hadn't been of legal drinking age. Val tried not to give her brother shit for dating a college student 10 years his junior, but sometimes it was hard.
I just started my final MBA internship.
Carol's eyes glimmered, though if it was from the wine or the excitement of possibly having something in common with the only other young woman at the party, Val couldn't say.
It's with Marriott. We're getting ready to open a new resort in Myrtle Beach.
Hank flipped over the next card. 4 of hearts.
That's great.
Val tried her best to remain vague.
Someone hacked into one of our clients' project funding accounts and stole some money. They're threatening to steal more if the
Sample complete. Ready to continue?